Welcome back to What the Fertility Season 4. This morning we are sitting down with Beth, which is super special since we did an episode with her, this past fall, I think,
Yeah.
when we were on a little hiatus. And so Beth has her own fertility journey, and she also has her own podcast called Quiet the Clock. And it's really, from a therapist perspective, kind of breaking down like societal expectations on timelines, and we feel like that just fits so well with the fertility community because we're always on to the next thing. We're kind of feeling like time's getting away from us. So we're super excited you're here, Beth. Thank you so much.
Oh my gosh. Thank you guys for having me. I'm so excited to be here. And like I said to you, when I first connected with you guys, I love what you're doing. I love the name of your podcast. It's so extremely important to be having these conversations and just putting more information out there for women. So I'm so happy and honored to be here.
No, thank you. Yeah, we're so excited, especially getting to be on someone else's podcast and now kind of getting to switch it and now have you on. It's such a cool perspective that we don't really get to do. So, if you want to just even kind of start, I don't think we're familiar with like really your fertility journey as much. If you want to kind of start there and let us know how it all began for you.
Yeah, gosh. So I would say my fertility journey started at 37 when I decided to freeze my eggs. And part of this story is the catalyst for my podcast, Quiet the Clock, because I did all of these sort of milestone things later in life. And I didn't meet my partner till 34. We wanted to spend some time together before we started thinking about family planning. And I started to feel the anxiety of time. So at 37, I made the decision to freeze my eggs. At 39, I got pregnant naturally, like that. Like I literally got off the pill and was pregnant, which now I realize is just like the biggest miracle ever. So I had my son at 40. I always knew that I wanted more than one child. And that's the thing, we just don't have control over these things, but that is still my desire. So what I decided to do, and it's so funny because people ask me this question, I never thought to just try naturally. I guess because of my age at this time, I'm now 42. We ended up thawing those eggs, fertilizing them, and making embryos. And it never occurred to me to try naturally at that point, just because there's all these narratives around age and fertility. And if you're this age, it's like, these are the odds and these are the numbers. So we did that. And because I got pregnant so easily with my son, I just assumed like my body is built for this. This is going to be a breeze. I made the decision to fertilize and do my first transfer at the place where I froze my eggs, which ended up being a complete disaster. I was so misinformed. I didn't know anything. I wasn't getting questions answered, and I really should have gone with my gut because it just didn't feel right. In the end, that transfer didn't work. The embryo didn't implant, and from there, I transferred my embryos out of that place, which was a huge learning lesson because if you don't feel good or something's not feeling right in your gut, you've got to advocate and make a change for yourself. And it's unfortunate because I've learned so much through my fertility journey, and everything I know now, I never would have done that transfer. I would have canceled the transfer.
Yeah.
You have so much expertise. And when you mentioned that you did egg freezing, which I completely forgot you did, you have this phenomenal resource on your Instagram page. And I actually have sent it to two friends, your egg
Oh,
freezing.
good. Oh my gosh, good.
Yeah. And I read through it, the whole thing. Like, I have no intent of freezing my eggs, but I read through the whole thing. Is that just in the link in your bio on your Instagram?
I'll have to ask my team about that, but I meant there. I
I
don't do
think
all
it
the
is. I think it
technical things.
is.
And
But
it,
yeah, I felt really passionate about creating that because there was so much I didn't know. I had so many guests on that shared their egg freezing stories, and one of the common narratives was like, "Why didn't anybody tell me this?"
Yeah.
And I'm sure both of you can relate. Like, there's still so much I'm learning as I continue on this fertility journey, and I think it's freaking criminal. I think it is so criminal that there's so much that like we don't know going into this that we have to find out for
That falls
ourselves.
on us to just do
All
our
of
own
it,
research. Yeah. And
And
just
that's
kind
all
of
of
why I
it.
figure it
love,
out. Yeah.
yeah, and that's why I loved your resource because I think you even have like the top 10 questions and it's kind of like where you can like write in it and stuff. But it's so interesting to hear you say, you felt really comfortable with the egg freezing portion and then you go into IVF and that's a whole different situation because you had a great
Well,
experience.
I wouldn't definitely was not comfortable with the egg freezing portion, and I could only have created that guide after going through it and speaking to so many other women about it. But it was another one of those experiences where I was so in the dark. I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't even learn about, honestly, like I went through egg freezing, I had my son, and I didn't even learn about my cycle, what the phases of my cycle are, signs
Yeah.
of ovulation until trying to have my second baby.
Isn't
And
that
that
crazy?
is crazy and problematic.
I hear that often. I do.
Yeah.
Especially with women with secondary infertility. They're like, I think we've had a few on. They're like, I didn't even know like a luteal phase or progesterone because it's
It just
something that,
happened.
yeah, and
I
it's
just
something that
got
just
pregnant. Yeah.
happens. Yeah.
I knew nothing. I knew nothing. And that is what is so important. That's why I love your podcast. That's why, one of the goals of my podcast now is just we need the information to be able to ask the questions. And if you don't know it, and that was my experience with the first transfer, I didn't know anything. So I didn't even know what questions to ask.
Spot
Yeah,
on.
And
Yeah.
exactly.
You don't even know what to ask. People are like, what do I even ask? Okay, so I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I just found so much benefit in the egg freezing resource that you have.
oh my God, I appreciate that. Honestly, like if it helps one person, it's like doing its job.
It's
So
already
I'm
helped
I'm
my girlfriend. She took it in for her appointment, and she of course like has great AMH, and they made the decision. I think she's 35, and he was like, "You're good to wait another year or two." And I think you even kind of mentioned some of that stuff too, of like, "Hey, you just want to consider these factors." But I just wanted to touch on that because we don't have a ton of guests on that do egg freezing, so I wanted to touch on that before we.
Oh, I'm happy to talk about that. It's so interesting what you just shared. Your friend was told by their doctor. I think again, both of you guys you have to go with your gut. And like, I don't know if that's great advice to wait. I had a
Yeah.
girlfriend that went in, said same thing. Doctor said her numbers were great. You have time, you can wait. She went back a year later and her numbers were completely different. Now, I mean, there's a little caveat to that because there's so much I have learned you can do holistically through lifestyle and supplementation that can help. And those numbers are not always the, only indication of fertility health. But you got to make your own decision. I don't think that's
100%.
advice from a
I
doctor.
think you either said it or maybe I've heard it somewhere else. It's like there's no you're never gonna get younger. Like it might like like if you do it at 35, like that's likely gonna yield a little bit better results than if you do it 2 years from now. And it's just I think it's a really hard thing for a single woman who's waiting to find her partner make that decision.
Oh, it's such an emotional. I mean, listen, it's all of it is so heavy and emotional and physically taxing and financially taxing. But there really is something to doing it alone. Now, I froze in a relationship which has its own, Rob and I were together, or I mean, we're still together. That has its own feelings and emotions around it. But being a single woman doing this, it doesn't feel like while it's a choice, it doesn't feel like a choice. It feels like I have to because I'm this age. I'm not partnered up
Yeah.
yet. I don't know what the future holds. And
And I'm
I
sure it's not what you like what people envision. Like they obviously
no,
you think of you want this fairy tale, you meet the guy, you get pregnant, and so like it's then having to grieve even just like what you thought life would look like, I'm
totally.
sure.
Like
Yeah.
you have to rewrite the script. You have to recreate a narrative. And that's, the basis of my podcast is we have been sold this fairy tale and we've been given this blueprint of what things are supposed to look like. And like it's linear and it's one way. And it's just like you said, Amanda, it's like meet the guy, get engaged, and for so many women and by these ages, and for so many women, that's not the blueprint. But
No.
because it's the one we're comparing ourselves to, then we feel like shit.
Yeah. It's
For
so true.
sure. And I think too, like when all three of us are in a situation to do IVF because we're like, we need to have our child, these women are like, I mean, egg freezing is IVF. They're having to do the
Yeah.
It is.
shots by themselves. They're having to go under anesthesia and have an egg retrieval and they're alone. And this is something that they're like, well, maybe I don't even have to do it. Where I feel like we are faced with infertility or faced with like having miscarriages, you're like, this is my only choice. Like just step over the line and do it. It's just so complex. And I really appreciate you letting us talk about this for a
Yeah, it's really a really amazing proactive decision. And I struggled with the decision. And, a lot of women that have come on and shared their stories, all of them have said, I wish I've done this sooner. But it's a very hard decision to make. And a lot of women take a long time to make that decision because it is a hard one. And same for me. I was happy with the results that I got. But not everyone gets those results at 37, 38, 39. And so back to what your friend was told, I wouldn't listen. I wouldn't
I
listen to
know.
the doctor.
Okay, so you make a great point. Okay, so you did egg freezing, then you miraculously get pregnant, like at an age where people say it's not even like really that high
39.
high
Yeah.
chance. And so then you have your son, and how did you get thrown back into, okay, this isn't going to work as easy the second time?
Really after the first, maybe There's such this, like, I say this so much now, like there's this ignorance bliss for women that don't have to go through this. And often I think about my first pregnancy, there was not a thought in my mind that anything would go wrong. It wasn't like, now for me, after having 4 miscarriages, the goal is not to get pregnant. The goal is to stay pregnant. And I just like, there was no thought in my mind once I got a positive pregnancy test with my son that anything would go wrong. And it was kind of at the tail end of COVID where partners were still not allowed for ultrasounds. So I just like walked into these ultrasounds, like thinking everything was going to be fine. Like no, literally not a thought in my mind. And so the first transfer not working really shook me because I just didn't even think that was like a possibility. I think I was still like naively hopeful going into the second transfer, which worked. And when it worked, I was like, great, like this
Yeah.
is it. Like
The one before was a fluke. I'm good. I'm
Yeah.
back on track.
yeah,
Yeah.
not the right protocol. My first transfer, we did an unmedicated cycle, and I was like, okay, probably not the right protocol. Great, medicated cycle, pregnant, not thinking. And then I go into which should have been the heartbeat ultrasound, and no heartbeat.
Good.
Were you alone? I'm sorry, Amanda and I are like, questions.
Go ahead.
Were you alone when you went
No, no, Rob was there with me. And I remember sitting in the waiting room with him and being like, I'm nervous.
Mm.
And then you go in and I couldn't, I was like convulsing. I was just so hysterical. My doctor's like, because they were trying to, I think they did an internal and then they were trying to do like, they had another tech come in. I was like, couldn't calm myself enough for them to like do the ultrasound, like, what I don't even know what
It's just such a gutted feeling. There's
100%.
nothing you can do. Like there's not like, well, maybe let me try this. So I mean, it's over, and I'm so sorry for all 4 of your losses.
Oh, wow. Yeah. It's so, yeah. And, it's like an interesting cycle because like and I don't think you fully grieve. I think there will be a point where I fully grieve, but I'm still in the process of like doing. But for me, it's always been this cycle of like, I go in this hole, come out of the hole,
Mm-hmm.
go right back at it, gain some more hope, hopeful, another loss, then back, it's just this cycle I know so well now, which is horrible. Like nobody wants to be in
Uh-huh.
this.
Do you feel
100%.
like I always like love that you're a therapist? Do you feel
Yeah.
because Amanda and I are just shaking our heads like, yep, know the cycle as well. Do
Yeah.
you feel like after each subsequent loss, the grieving or the whole cycle gets shorter? And it's probably different for everybody, but I feel like I've seen Amanda go through it and I know I went through it. I just feel like they keep getting shorter because you're like, I just have to, I know that I'm going to get out of it. I know I'm going to
Yeah.
have to have these feelings. Is that something you've experienced?
Yeah, they definitely get shorter. I think so much happens. I think obviously, I mean, so much credit and praise to any woman going through fertility. I think we're like probably the strongest, most resilient women. I mean, it's not even just what's happening to us emotionally, physically. It's like what we talked about earlier, like the advocacy, the research, seeking out resources, finding your own information, like figuring it out. It's like your own detective. So there's just so much that goes into it. But yeah, I did find like each cycle got shorter. I think where I'm at now is, I think Amanda, I've seen some posts for you. I really like leaning into faith right now a lot.
Mhm.
I think in the beginning it was a lot of like the doing and the protocols and the supplements and like all the things I could control. And
Yeah.
I think it was after maybe my third loss where I started reading Spirit Babies and like, just listening to religious podcasts and like leaning more into faith. And that's kind of where I am now because there is so much we can't control. And
Sure.
again, I'd circle back to like my podcast, like we don't control the timeline. We
Mm.
really don't. And there's so much anxiety and fear and sadness when we try to,
Yeah.
um so I think because of those type of things, like each one has gotten shorter. And also, and sadly, unfortunately, it's like, okay, I've been here, like I've done it before. I'm not like naively like crazy hopeful because I know, this has unfortunately been my situation.
And you
Well,
kind of like,
like what to expect. Like, that feeling, what's like about to happen. You're about to go into that little hole and like you just know what's coming. And I think that's what is just so hard.
Yeah. And I remember, Kat, I always think of you because when we recorded, you were kind of, I think I was still in this like holding on to all the control and making sure I do all the things right and it all has to be perfect. And I remember you kind of being like, not in that space and like
Yeah,
have a glass of wine and kind of like if you have the glass of wine or not, it's not going to affect. So I kind of been there and more of like the letting go and the surrender because it's so taxing on your mental health. It's insanely taxing on your mental health.
100%.
it is. It is.
Well,
It's
there,
exhausting.
yeah, I was just gonna say, like, for me and like the faith side, there just comes a point where like you genuinely just have to like open your hands and just be like, okay, I just give it to you. There's nothing, like you said, the control part, like there's nothing that I can do that one is gonna change any of those losses that we had. And
Mhm.
so if I just like completely surrender, like I trust in you and whatever happens, like is meant to happen. And I know that's like so much easier said than done. And that's so
I
like
was gonna say that,
cliche.
like it's hard.
Yeah.
I was having this conversation. I have an amazing like support team, which I'm so grateful for. And I was having a conversation with one of my coaches, and we were talking about faith and surrender and giving it up to God. And there's also this like guilt of when you can't fully be there. And she's like, listen, God knows we're not perfect and we're not always perfect in our faith. So, it's okay. And it
Yes,
is, again, the other mentally taxing thing is to try to stay there and try to stay positive.
for
It's
sure.
really, it's daunting. It's a
It
really,
is.
in so many levels, in so many different ways, it's such a daunting experience.
It absolutely is. So you have your
100%.
failed transfer, and let me ask you, the failed transfer was at the same clinic as your frozen eggs, and after
Mhm.
that, you were like, "Come on, we're going somewhere
I'm
else."
out.
Is that what
Yeah.
happened? Peace.
It was the worst experience I've ever had. Like literally, like I couldn't even tell you the doctor that did my transfer. I never spoke to a doctor. I never saw a doctor. He could be standing in front of my face. I wouldn't know who it was,
That's
which
awful.
is
That is wild.
criminal. It's criminal. It's criminal. And that was, and I've talked about this on my podcast, like this is again, it comes back to timing. It's like it's hard to stay patient, especially when you want something so desperately. And I wanted to have tried for a second a lot sooner, but I'm not the only person in this equation, and we got to get people on the same page. And I know, Kat, I think you relate to
Yeah.
that. My impatience, did not serve me well because I was like, go, let's do the thing. And I didn't tune into my gut. I knew along the way, like something wasn't right. I didn't feel right about it, but I just like went full steam ahead. Um, there was a lot of miscommunication. There was a lack of communication. I felt really in the dark about like the process and what was happening. And again, like, my THS was high. They put me on levothyroxine like 2 days before the transfer. And they're like, and I had connections with other fertility doctors that have been my podcast. And I asked them, my THS was 2.94. And I'm like, it's supposed to be 2.5 or under. And the clinic was reassured, no, 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 it'll be fine. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. Obviously it wasn't fine. Um, so yeah, I worked like hell to get those embryos out of there. And when I spoke to them at first, they're like, yeah, it'll take 6 to 8 weeks to get them. I said, hell, it will. I'm like,
That's
no.
insane.
That's
I got them
crazy.
out of there in like a week and a half. I'm like,
You're
no.
like, I'll come get
Yeah,
them.
I will
Yeah.
pick them up
You
myself.
can't tell a woman that is like to wait like for
Right?
that. There's a lot
Yeah.
of waiting, but like I'm not waiting. Like put these things in fucking car and get
Yeah.
them Greenwich Hospital.
100%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's insane. Okay, so you transfer them, and obviously you're like, I feel like we don't talk about this a lot either, but like you're grieving a failed transfer because, and I think Amanda, you can relate that to that a lot too. It's like that was my baby. Like now I'm like not
100%.
grieving like the miscarriage, but I'm grieving that like this didn't even like stick.
Yeah, I think, and Amanda, I'm sure you can relate to this too. I feel like, or at least my experience, I won't speak for you, but maybe you relate. Like, I don't think I've done a lot of the grieving yet because you're just right on to the next thing.
Yeah.
Like,
Um,
even transferring the embryos was like tons of paperwork, tons of phone calls, getting things notarized. Like that took a lot, so you're
yeah.
in the thick of
You're
that.
just like going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you're not like, of course you're sad. Of course I was in like my hole, but then you're kind of like full speed ahead to the next
100%.
thing.
Oh yeah, I don't think I even had started to grieve the loss of any of them until I was out of embryos, like until it was just done. And because
Sure.
like the loss in May, I was like you, I was just moving on. I'm like, okay, how do I schedule the next thing? Like, what do I need to do? Like, tell me what's for the next cycle. Like, I was just like, okay, I still have like a chance. And so
Mhm.
I kept going. And then I think this past time in December, losing that, then I'm like, I'm done. Like I have nothing.
And
And that would
you're going to
really,
therapy now, right?
I
To,
am.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, good. How is it?
It's good. Yeah, it's good. It's definitely, it's so funny being, I mean, because I'm a licensed therapist as well. So like
No
seeing,
way. Wait a
yeah,
second. What?
yeah, yeah.
How did I never know that?
I mean, I'm not like, I don't practice anymore after I had my son. Like I stay home now, but yeah. So it is like always
Oh
like,
my God. Wait,
I,
Amanda, I feel like you have like a new calling.
oh, it's so funny. So I don't
Well,
know.
because
So
you
I'm
know
like, it's
what?
always
There are
like fun going
not
to
so.
therapy, but
Wait a
yeah.
second. I never knew. Okay, we're gonna talk offline. But
Yes, 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 yes. Let's do
Yeah,
it.
that has to be a unique perspective, but it's funny, and we can keep moving on. But like for me, my daughter was 2 before I went to therapy for the first time for my previous 6 losses. And then I'm in such a weird situation because I did that. I mean, I think I told you I did it for like 3 or 4 months, and
mm,
it took a lot. And you guys as therapists know, but like I feel like we never even got there. Like I feel like there was all this surface stuff that we had to get through
yeah,
before we
it
could
takes
even
time.
get there.
100%.
And
Yeah.
then I get pregnant, and it's like I don't want to be in that mind space while I'm pregnant. So now I have
Yeah.
to put that on hold. And so I'm sure like you guys are all saying, I'm going to be 6 years out from having 8 miscarriages, and I'm going to just then start to likely grieve those. And it's
Yeah,
just
I mean, listen,
wild.
people have like repressed childhood trauma that they don't process until adulthood. But it,
Yeah.
the thing is, it stays in your body until it's processed. So, I honor, and I'm glad you're honoring like where you want to be now in this pregnancy, but it probably will be beneficial to like revisit
For
Yeah.
that
sure.
when you
Yeah.
feel ready.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. We are branching
I
off
know,
topic.
but oh
Let's
my
talk about
God, my wheels are spinning.
everything.
Okay, so you go to the new clinic now with
New
your
clinic.
embryos that you
So
broke
I
out.
think, I think there's let me just back up and share one other thing. So the clinic I ended up with is a clinic I started with. The doctor I went to, who I felt insanely comfortable with, who I wanted to do my transfers with. However, they had this like emergency closing of the lab. And I was like, I don't want to wait. I don't want to wait. And then, so
Yeah.
I just went back to the first place. So I came back to who I originally started with, who I felt so comfortable with. And I was thinking about this the other day, like my doctor is in every single one of my appointments. It's not a nurse. It is my doctor. I have a relationship with her. She sits with me. She listens to me. Like that is what you have to find. And if you have to wait a little bit to find that, like you have to reconcile that. And I couldn't, but I ended up back there with her. I did the transfer with her with my kind of weakest embryo. It was a CC. We had 2 boys and 3 girl embryos, and we wanted to try for a boy. And so we used that embryo, implanted, and then, like I said, at 7.5 weeks, or before, we lost that baby. Um, and that really started this like deep dive into figuring out what was going on. Like why, I had a baby naturally, like my body did this before, I had a transfer that didn't work now, and a miscarriage. So I was kind of really puzzled. And then from that miscarriage to now, I've been on this complete like investigative health journey to figure out like what's been going on. And I've found some things and healed some things. So I'm hopeful like I've set my body up in a better way. But again, it was my own. And as much as I love my fertility doctor, she's not the one that's been figuring these things out. It's been me.
Right. Right. I think that has to be so difficult. All 3 of us are in that situation where we've had a child and then had miscarriage or failed transfer. And it's just like so mind-boggling. And probably anyone that has secondary infertility of like, but how did it work this time? Especially when you're transferring like an embryo that you know is healthy.
Yeah, and I felt really blessed I feel so blessed for my son. I feel so blessed for, how quickly I got pregnant, because it was a hard road for Rob and I to decide on children, like a very hard road. And I think once we finally got to a place where we agreed, like I don't think I could have emotionally like handled getting my period every month. So I feel really blessed. But knowing what I know now and everything I went through, I was like, this kid's a miracle. And
Literally, yeah.
for me, while secondary infertility has been so, so hard, my son has been like the thing that like gets me through. And I feel so deeply for women that this is their experience with their first, because I can look at my son and he distracts me. He brings me back to joy. He puts me in such gratitude. And it's really like, if it ends up just the 3 of us, like we'll be okay.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean like, and my coach said this to me too. She's like, accepting 3 doesn't mean there won't be 4. But I can't imagine going through this and not even having a child
Yeah.
already, or being able to be a mother.
Yeah, and Amanda and I went through it with the first, and just it's so crazy you said that. Just last night, I mean, I'm 20 weeks pregnant, and I'm terrified to this day. And just last night, I like was looking at my daughter, and I'm like, if something happens, I will be okay. We will be okay. And that's because I can look at her, and I just like I'm a mom. I'm so like, and I hate to say this on a podcast if people are listening, they don't have children. Like, you will also be okay without children. But it is with
100%.
this when you are going through it a second time, I do think your child is like it really helps. It really
Oh
helps.
yeah.
And that's just like, that I think goes across the board, not just in relation to motherhood and fertility, is that like when life throws stuff at us, or when life doesn't look a way that we thought it would, if we're in our mid-30s and single, like it is a choice to say, like, I'll be okay. Like I'll rewrite a different vision. I will make my life happy. I will find joy. Um, and that's kind of where I was at before I met Rob. I was 34 and single, and everybody around me was like married and having babies and buying houses. And I was kind of like, okay, if these things aren't going to happen for me, like I'm going to still choose to be happy. I'm not going to
Yeah.
sit in unhappiness my whole life because I didn't get these things. I'm going to write a different vision, and I'm going to still create a beautiful life.
That's so powerful. Yeah.
Love that. Yeah. That's amazing.
It's also not easy to be there, but
It's not
like
easy.
we do have,
No.
I mean, we do have a choice of how we look at things, and the way we look at things, impacts how we feel 100%.
For
Absolutely.
sure. Goodness. Okay, so your last transfer was when? Are we like up to date? Have you had any more
Okay, so last transfer
transfer?
was almost a year ago. And then from there, we tried a couple IUIs that worked, but also resulted in miscarriage. We got pregnant naturally around Thanksgiving, which also ended in miscarriage.
Yes, I'm so
So just
sorry.
trying to like regroup. I
Yeah.
started a new functional medicine doctor, actually right before I got pregnant in November. Um, and so she's really tweaked a lot of the things like and different supplements and things. And so that's kind of where we're at
Yeah.
now.
Do
Um,
you have like a diagnosis, or it's just kind of like, yeah, it's just
so I have, well, yes, I do. I have Hashimoto's. Um, And also this new functional medicine doctor, because no doctor before, no matter the amount of blood work I've done, has told me that I'm also anemic. So I have those two things. I don't know if there's anything more than that, but those are two
Yeah.
things we've been
wait,
focused
can
on.
you talk about being I'm anemic, but
Wait,
no
me
one,
too.
are
That's
you
so
really?
weird.
Okay,
Yeah.
I am like borderline when I'm not pregnant, but like with my daughter, I had to get iron infusions my whole pregnancy. I never was, even then, I was never told it had any, like it could cause infertility. Is that like
Oh
a
my
thing?
God, I didn't know either. And then I Googled
I had no
myself,
idea.
like,
I still don't
dude,
know. Wait, tell
Yeah,
us.
I don't know.
I don't know exactly why, but iron is so important for pregnancy.
Yeah, I mean, when you look on your app, it's always like, make sure you're having iron. What's bizarre is this pregnancy, I have too much iron. Which just, we're not even
Are
gonna go.
you like doing supplementation? Or you?
No, no, I had the iron infusions over 2 years ago with my daughter in the third I had them the whole third trimester, and because that can really affect your baby if you're anemic, and so they just want to make sure. But even my MFM's like you wouldn't still have like an influx of iron from 2 years ago of the
Oh my God,
infusion.
Yeah.
interesting.
It's so
That's so
weird.
interesting.
Yeah, like my blood work came back and it was like off the charts high iron. But anyways, okay,
I
so
feel like she's off the charts for everything. She's
oh,
like, I
1%.
will be here.
1% of problems. Yeah. Okay, so Hashimoto's, that's thyroid, right?
Are you
Thyroid.
on
Yeah.
that thyroid medicine still from when they gave you it?
Well, let me tell you this, that was the wrong fucking medication for me.
Wait,
Yeah.
okay,
So
they put me
like
on that. So tell me more because the same thing before my transfer, my levels were high. They gave me this, my transfer didn't work, blah, 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 blah.
this last
And now I
transfer
stopped
with,
taking it.
with this,
The last transfer was the very only time she was on.
The only time I've never had thyroid issues my entire life. My levels have always been normal. This last one, my levels were too high. They
Right.
said I had to go on this medicine or they won't do the transfer. So I obviously went on the medicine. It's my last freaking embryo. And the embryo didn't, I mean, it planted, whatever. It didn't work. I lost the
I
baby.
was watching from afar. I
Yeah.
was sending all my prayers.
And I stopped the medicine because I'm like, I'm not going to stay on this meds for the rest of my life. So I don't even know
Let me
my
ask you
levels.
this. Let me ask you this. Did they do a full thyroid panel on you?
So I have lupus, so they did not. So then I went to my my rheumatologist, and they did a full workup on me because I was like, I've never had any issues with my thyroid. And they're like, well, let me see. Sometimes when you have lupus, you can then have like Hashimoto's. So then they did a whole thing, and my
Like your
levels were fine.
T4, right?
My
Remember, I was
T4 all
asking you, I was
fine,
like, "What's your
and it was
T4?"
normal. It
Yeah.
was
What,
normal.
okay.
But they my
What I'm learning, like, what, so,
sorry, not to throw that on you.
oh my God, I'm like, you and I will definitely talk after this podcast about a
Yeah.
lot of things. Um, I have lost, while I love my fertility doctor a lot, I have lost all faith in Western medicine. I believe more in functional medicine and holistic healing and medicine. The I'd be curious to see your blood work because their ranges for normal are not what's optimal. Like you'll go to a functional medicine doctor and they will say that's off. Like for example, my T3 was under 3, and for my fertility doctor, that came back normal. It optimal is 3.6 for pregnancy, and they
Yeah,
wouldn't flag it.
so I did what, yeah. So, and I know Amanda kind of did too, but I was with a functional doctor like parallel to my fertility journey, and it was, and we learned that. So when Amanda got hers, I think I sent you, right, the functional
Yes, the whole
range.
thing, what they did. And then
Yeah,
I remember sending you my numbers, but now I don't remember what it was. I'll
I don't
have to look
either.
back.
But
I'll
you're
have to
spot
look.
on. Like even your TSH, I think they're like anywhere up to 4, 4.5. But then like you go and you're like, no, it should be under like 2.5.
But the problem is like, especially Amanda, similar boat. It's like, okay, why is it high? We're not
Mhm.
even looking at why it's high. It's so formulaic. It's like, oh, it's high. This
Here's
medication.
Max.
So I stayed on that, and my the fertility doctor I'm currently with kept me on that too until I saw. So I got on that November of 2023. In August of 2024, I saw my first functional medicine doctor. He's like, that doesn't even work. That's not even what you need. That's not even what you need.
Yeah.
Wow.
The
I
day
was
of my transfer, they took a second blood work right before they did the transfer to see and make sure like what my levels were, and my levels were higher, so they just upped my dose.
right.
Like
So
they
you're
were
not looking
higher
at
after
why,
being
what's
on
They
it.
happening
were
in your
higher after
body.
being on the medicine for
No.
like what, 30 days was it, I think? I
Yeah.
don't know. And then so they were like, oh, here, just take a higher dose. And I'm
No,
like,
so that was so almost for a year I was on the wrong thyroid medication. And so they got me on an MP thyroid, which is T4 and T3 because my T4 was not converting to T3. So the first functional medicine doctor I saw got me on that. And I like that, I like this doctor, but they don't really have a fertility lens. So I found, oh, I found this person through one of your previous guests.
Is it baby after
Yes.
TTC? Okay, I was waiting
Yes.
to drop because we did a whole thyroid episode with her. I'm so glad you found
yes.
her.
She's
Wait, that's so
the
cool.
She's the best. She is so supportive. She has so many resources. She has been like a godsend. So she directed me to the current functional medicine doctor that I'm working with, who was like, okay, right thyroid medication, wrong dose. You need more. So she upped my thyroid. She told me I'm anemic, added more iron, added vitamin C to like help absorb the iron. So she's got me on a whole different protocol. But it was really like, even while doing my own research, it wasn't until I really found her
Yeah.
that I feel
Begin
like
to
I
apply
finally am
to.
getting like the right things that I need.
Um,
Well, that's
so are
incredible that you
you,
found that.
yeah. So are you, because you're so raw off your last loss, like, are you in a space where you guys are like, we're gonna try again? I heard you at the beginning. You're like, I still have a desire. Yeah, you're like, yeah, we are.
Yeah.
What's your next step?
Um,
And if you don't have one, that's great too.
yeah, I think we're still, figuring things out, Rob and I, of what's next. I want to be mindful that I feel really ready, like probably more emotionally than physically. Um, I'm trying to be more intentional and thoughtful and like patient about what's next instead of just like running full steam at it, which is what I've been doing.
Yeah.
I think I started working with her again a little bit, maybe end of October, maybe. So sometimes like with these things, you need to give them time to like, which is hard to stay patient, right? So she's like, you need like typically to say 3 months with any like kind of protocol changes. Um, I think the biggest place I'm at is just trying not to let this overtake my life. It like really overtook my life. It colored everything. It dictated everything, work, how I would schedule things, how I might plan things. Um, and I just don't want to let it do that anymore. I don't want it. Bless you, bless you, bless you. Um, you guys know, like it can just be,
Yeah.
you wake up and it's on your chest. Like you could be in every decision you make throughout the day, what you drink, what you eat, I mean,
All consuming.
And this is, now that you're saying all that, this is what I talked about a ton on your podcast, was like the second time we were trying, I don't know how, by the grace of God, just by maybe not being like in that headspace, but I was still having miscarriages. I was still trying for a baby, but it was not all consuming. And I just remember like how much just better I felt like just day to day. And it's like, yeah, I'm still having miscarriages. I'm still trying for a baby. It still sucks, but like it's also not in my day to day, so I can just breathe a little bit better. And that was really nice.
yeah, it is. I mean, the space is really nice. And you know, after the last miscarriage, I took all of December off and just like created that space. And I feel really grateful to be in a place that I can do that. And that was really helpful in slowing down. And because what I realized after the last miscarriage was like, I was full steam ahead at everything. Like I wasn't slowing down with work. I wasn't like, I was trying to do these things simultaneously. And I'm like, this is not serving me at all. And I think it's a lot of work to kind of like give yourself permission to do that, especially being in like, you know, working in New York City and like it's hustle culture and everybody's doing 800 million things. And I kind of always work that way. Um, so there's a lot of work emotionally and mentally to kind of take care of yourself throughout this process.
Let me ask you this as a therapist, because I'm sure people think this all the time. Like, is this so hard to be going through this in your personal life and then having clients? Because I know, Amanda, you said like you had to step back at a point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you
Because I
feel
was working with children and I at one point was just like, I can't do this anymore.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's really, I
Yeah.
mean, I work with children.
is it
Yeah,
hard? Yeah, is
that
it?
was really hard. I mean, luckily, so the November 2023, I decided to take a big step back clinically, not for fertility reasons, just because I had started the podcast, I run a group practice. It was just a lot
Yeah.
happening. And that really ended up serving me really well because I couldn't imagine going through what I was going through and and having a full caseload. And then it got hard for other reasons. It's like some of my clients got pregnant. Some of my clients were talking about a second transfer when Rob and I weren't quite there. And so, you know, I want to hold space for that and support that. But like those were hard sessions for me to sit through. And then, you know, again, after last miscarriage, I just couldn't show up for
Yeah.
anybody. Like, I
Yeah.
did it throughout all of
That's
it.
fair. Yeah.
It was hard. And it's a disservice to my clients to try to, and I've worked with my clients for so long. You know, not many know what I'm going through, a couple, and some I just said, you know, I need some space. I have some medical things going on. But they are so great, my clients, and they're, you know, I offered them if they wanted to see someone else in my practice while I step back, and they're like, no, we'll wait, like it's fine. And I've since resumed work, but again, like because I did that big cutback in last November 2023, it's a
Yeah.
small number of people.
That's great. I know Amanda talks about that a little bit too. I think you were like, I was, you know, having clients that were like having teen pregnancies, and I was so frustrated. You know, you were like, I'm not serving them because I'm going to give
Yeah.
them wrong advice.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm literally like, I'll take your baby.
Do
But
you want to adopt?
I'm like, I don't think this is probably ethical. Like,
yeah,
I need
she's
to
like,
maybe step away.
I gotta move away from this. But yeah, I mean, thank you so much for sharing your personal journey and where you're at now. So, like, just transparently, is there anything that you want to share with listeners that we haven't touched on yet, whether it's from Quiet the Clock or just your personal experience?
Gosh, I mean, there's so much. I would say just keep listening to your podcast, come over and listen to my podcast. There's just so many. I don't think there's like one thing that I could say. Um, I guess giving yourself space and permission. And I think the mental emotional work is hugely important, probably more important than the supplements. And it's all going to manifest into, you know, how you feel physically. Um, Trying to find the joy in every day, even when things are really hard. Being in gratitude has been so helpful. You know, I've had two friends that have lost children, you know, like within the last year. So just being grateful for where we are now, and just, even if it's not where we thought we would be, there's still something to be grateful for. And don't get so caught up in looking at the future or what you don't have yet, that you miss out on what you're having now. And I think that's my biggest focus right now is like, my son is at such a great age and I don't want to miss any of it. I don't want him to see me sad. Because I don't want to look back and be like, I was like this mess in bed while my son is like growing up. So just because it doesn't look like you thought it would, doesn't mean it's not great or something great isn't coming.
I love that.
Uh,
Thank you so much.